Thousands of people buy the F1 game every year, but have you ever wondered how many people are actually playing the game at the same time? Well, don't worry, because I've got you covered. Today we're diving into the history of every F1 game from 2010 to 2025's all-time peak of concurrent players and when in time this peak occurred. And I have to say, I think this list might surprise you. For those unfamiliar, concurrent players indicate how many people are playing a game at the same time, and the best source for this kind of data for any game is SteamDB. So we start here with the lowest amount of concurrent players, which was for Formula 1 2011, the third installment to the modern F1 game franchise, with a total of 1,747 players. The game would be released in September of 2011, which would see the game's concurrent players peak around this time, and wouldn't reach such numbers after this. In fact, it very quickly dipped by the time we got to early 2012. And you do have to remember as well, not everyone was playing F1 games on PC, as Xbox 360 and PS3 was still a very popular choice for gaming around this time. Next up we have F1 2014, which safe to say was for sure a very underwhelming game, as it was pretty much F1 2013, but with the 2014 cars and without the classic content. But funny enough, still remains the most fun and moddable Formula 1 game to date. Like, come on, look at this, you can literally model modern F1 cars into the base game. But all of this would result in a total of 2,393 players, which again peaked in the game's release month, which was October 2014. Codemaster's first proper installment would follow up next, which was F1 2010, the game that to this day still gets called one of the best F1 games of the modern franchise. This was also the first F1 game released for Windows since F1 Challenge 99-02, which was 7 years prior in 2003, and also the first HD Formula 1 game. F1 2010 would rack up 2,667 players and once again would peak during its release month, which just like F1 2011 was in September. We now turn our attention to a Formula 1 game that has featured a variety of game modes and exceptional gameplay for its time, Formula 1 2012. This game introduced an in-depth young drivers test as part of the career mode, along with Champions mode, and also included localized weather, a feature that today's F1 games actually lack. F1 2012 followed Codemaster's pattern of releasing games towards the end of the year, launching in September 2012. During that month it peaked of 3,654 concurrent players, and I noticed as well that F1 2012 consistently had the highest average number of concurrent players among the early installments, and still attracts a significant number of daily players nearly 14 years later. This clearly demonstrates how good the game was, and still is. F1 2016 was the game that introduced the first ever 10-season career mode, brought back the safety car after its absence in F1 2015, and featured a new safety car system with the virtual safety car. The game set the stage for future F1 titles, despite reaching a peak of 5,656 players and only ranking at number 12 on this list. One of my personal favourite F1 games is F1 2017, which was the first title since F1 2013 to feature classic content and the introduction of short circuits. I vividly remember the excitement building up to this game's launch in August, and if you weren't playing F1 games during this time, you were definitely missing out, because you generally just have to understand how thrilling it was with the early trailers Codemasters released, which just gives you goosebumps. And I can confidently say it was probably the most hyped I'd ever been for an F1 game. The excitement around F1 2017 peaked with 8,101 players in August 2017. There was another notable peak in March 2018 during a free weekend for the game, when the player numbers reached 6,586, but unfortunately that was the last time the game would see those kind of player numbers. We now enter the top 10, starting with F1 2013. This game introduced classic content to the modern F1 game series and remains the only title to feature classic tracks. However, it was removed from digital storefronts, including the Steam store, on December 31st 2016, and the delisting was due to an expired licensing rights for the drivers, cars and tracks included in the game, which was common for Codemaster's older titles. Aside from that, the game was exceptional, reaching a peak of 8,447 players, not during its release month of October 2013, but rather 5 months later in March 2014. I looked into possible reasons for this peak in player count and initially considered that it might be due to a free weekend. However, after investigating further, the only potential explanation I found was the game releasing for Mac in March 2014. Beyond that, I couldn't really identify any additional factors. At number 9 is what many consider to be an underrated F1 game, F1 2018. This game introduced driver interviews, a revamped air system, and similar to the real life season, the addition of the Halo protection device to the cars. While it may be overlooked, it still attracted a solid 9,809 players in August of 2018. The sequel to F1 2018 and F1 2019 saw an increase of nearly 3,000 concurrent players, which occurred in March 2020. The surge in players was partly due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the game being featured in a humble bundle during that month. The game's popularity continued into April, with the peak player count dipping slightly from 12,736 in March to 12,425 in April. Without the pandemic and the humble bundle, the game's peak player count might have been lower than the previous installment. During its release month, F1 2019 peaked at 9,445 players compared to F1 2018's peak of 9,809 players. We turn our attention to a recent Formula 1 game, F1 24, which is widely regarded as one of the lower points of the series. Despite introducing a new dynamic handling system, the sub compared to the Ferrari F14T, the game featured barely any new content and ultimately didn't deliver an engaging experience. It currently holds a Metacritic score of 79, which may seem acceptable and significantly higher than what many people would actually rate it. F1 24 experienced its peak in March 2025, attracting 13,327 players and making it number 7 on our list. A year before F1 24 we had F1 23, which similar to F1 2018 received a lot of opinions for being an underrated game. I strongly agree with this perspective, as the handling in F1 23 felt like a significant improvement compared to F1 22. The game also provided controller players with their most sustainable update in years, making it more enjoyable to play for both the wheel and controller, and additionally it brought back red flags for the first time in nearly a decade. F1 23 peaked during a free-to-play weekend in November 2023, reaching 14,512 players and exceeding its release peak by over 1,000 players. As we enter the top 5 we have F1 25, a game that will carry over into the 2026 season. It experienced a significant increase of 10,000 players compared to the game ranked 6th on this list. F1 25 peaked at 22,595 players during a free-to-play weekend in October 2025, and as of April 2026 the game is still averaging over 10,000 daily players and is likely to maintain at this level of engagement until the reimagined F1 game is released in 2027. When discussing some of the greatest Formula 1 games of all time, titles like F1 Championship Edition and F1 2010 often comes to mind. However, a more recent game that deserves a spot in that conversation is F1 2020, which ranks at number 4 on this list. This game is notable for being the last in the series to feature classic content and introducing an all-new My Team career mode, allowing players to create their own Formula 1 team for the first time. Overall, F1 2020 is a very well made game that was released in July 2020, peaking at 24,010 players, nearly a 12,000 increase compared to the previous title F1 2019. Additionally, F1 2020 experienced a second peak period in May 2021, reaching 22,810 players during a free-to-play weekend just months before the launch of F1 2021. I think number 3 will surprise you, as it's not really a highly rated F1 game in the franchise. This game is EA Sports' first official published F1 game since the takeover in 2021, titled F1 22. Notably, it peaked at 25,172 active players on its release day in June 2022, and you might be wondering how this happened when the game ultimately didn't meet our expectations. Well, I'd say there were several reasons for this, most likely the excitement surrounding the 2022 regulations, the anticipation of how EA would revamp the game, and the general buzz among players for the start of the new era of Formula 1. So as well as it wasn't really a good game in the end, the hype around it to begin with was very high. In 2021, EA Sports conducted a massive takeover of Codemasters, and F1 2021, which is number 2 on this list, became the last F1 game to use the full year title. Many fans believe this was the final decent F1 game before the decline in quality in the following years. Despite the removal of classic content, we received new circuits, including the modern Imola circuit. Additionally, Portugal was added as a free DLC in September 2021, along with another DLC featuring the new Jeddah Corniche circuit in Saudi Arabia, which aligned with the real-life calendar and was released in November 2021. The game reached its all-time peak in December 2021 with 25,575 players, which was 1,000 more than the number of players at its release in July. Interestingly, F1 2021 also experienced consistently different peak periods throughout its lifespan, with notable spikes in September 2021, January 2022 and March and April of 2022, each bringing in over 22,000 players during these months. And finally, this brings us to the F1 game, which has got the highest concurrent players out of all the games since 2010. And surprisingly, the top spot goes to F1 2015, which dominated the other games with an outstanding 88,029 concurrent players, which is over 60,000 more than the second place game. Now you might be wondering, what makes this so unexpected? F1 2015 marked a new era for F1 games featuring better gameplay, improved graphics and overall enhanced experience. However, the peak in player numbers didn't occur until nearly 3 years after its release in April 2018. If you look into the data graphic, it is truly astonishing. A game released in summer 2015 suddenly reached its highest number of active players in a random spring month of 2018. Interestingly, before this spike, the game hadn't even reached 5-digit player numbers. In fact, its release only peaked at 2,621 players. A free key giveaway at the end of March likely contributed to the massive surge in active players, otherwise F1 2015 would have ranked among the bottom 3 in terms of concurrent players on this list. The unusual situation is remarkable, and the fact remains that none of the other F1 games come close to beating this record, and it's possible that many years from now, F1 2015 will still hold the title for the highest number of concurrent players in any Formula 1 game. Well, that brings us to the end of the video. I really hope you've enjoyed watching it, and if you want to see more Formula 1 game content like you've just watched and much more, be sure to subscribe and let me know what you think of this in the comments below. But apart from that, take care now guys, and I will see you in my next video.